I feel compelled again to talk about the media today, in part because of the reaction we got, very, very big reaction and kindly very favorable reaction to the interview I did with Glenn Kessler. You'll recall he was, until a few days ago, the fabled fact checker, the dispenser of Pinocchios from the Washington Post. And he had written in his Substack that the Washington Post, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I think fairly, was addicted to its liberal readers and therefore couldn't risk producing content that was conservative or even fair for worry that more of its consumers would leave the paper and the digital subscriptions because they want a paper that is hostile to Donald Trump. And I wanted to talk to him about that because it's an extraordinary thing for a guy who worked decades in the Washington Post newsroom, who was their fact checker, one of the most important jobs at the paper, to try to hold all powerful interests accountable to the public interest fairly and accurately, not hold Donald Trump accountable unfairly. I thought, what would he say? How would he explain that? So a guy who cast himself as fair, acknowledging that the Post was addicted to its liberal supporters. I really didn't know what to expect. The reaction from you all on X and elsewhere, emails that you sent in, were pretty uniform. I don't recall seeing a single tweet or getting a single email from somebody saying you were unfair to Kessler or the Post isn't liberally biased. Here's some of the reaction on Twitter. A1 from somebody named Matt. Mark Halperin pushed Washington Post fact checker Kessler to admit cheap fake error. We talked a lot in the interview about how he fact checked a video showing Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline and suggested in his fact check that no, it was a misleading video. And this person, Matt, on Twitter wrote, if you think buying oceanfront property in Louisiana is a good idea, then you'll believe most fact checkers. If they can't obfuscate, they lie. That's their defense. Again, I have mixed feelings about fact checking in general, but this was a point of view a lot of you expressed that it's just not on the up and up. And that's unfortunate because if the Washington Post and other organizations are going to try to hold powerful interests accountable by fact checking them, people need to have confidence that it's being done in a fair way. Here's another one, A2. This is another reaction to the interview that was pretty common. This is a painful listen, and it amplifies how closed off to alternative perceptions Glenn Kessler was and still is. He seemed incapable of admitting and taking responsibility for something being wrong. Hello, human. Again, this is a mystery to me about Glenn Kessler and about others of his ilk, which is, how do they not see the bias? When for so many of us, certainly for a lot of Republicans, but also for me, someone who loves the Washington Post as an institution, who loves and values the importance of media in our society that's there, just they don't seem to see it. Here's another one, A3. This is along the same lines, another tweet from Dennis O'Brien. Kessler seems very sincere in his belief that the Washington Post is totally objective. This explains a lot. If a preponderance of journalists and dominant media share this judgment, Halperin says parenthetically, and they do, the problem of bias in the news industry is far worse than if they were intentionally skewing their reporting. I agree with that point of view. I'd almost prefer that they be doing it on purpose. But if it is, and again, I'm a decent reader of human beings, Glenn Kessler seemed to be saying he didn't think the Post was liberally biased. And I agree with that person who sent the tweet. It's just, how could it be and how insidious? All right, A4, one more tweet reaction. When you see your readers as a base, Kessler's term, much like a political party, then there is your problem. If you have a base, you're not journalism, you're a political party. You're a mouthpiece for a movement. Pathetic. And again, the reason I wanted Glenn Kessler to come on is he wrote his paper, his former home, his professional home for so long, was addicted to and is addicted to its left-wing audience. How do you change that? As I said, I don't know what I expected Kessler to say. I definitely was interested to see if he would admit anything about the paper. And occasionally over the years, I've talked to colleagues in liberal newsrooms and they've admitted it. They've shown a little weakness. Yeah, maybe sometimes some of our reporters. Instead, Kessler just dug in. He said, we have a liberal audience because we're based in Washington, D.C. We have a liberal audience because people look at our op-ed page and think we're liberal. And conservatives don't like us because they think our op-ed page is liberal. But it's got nothing to do with bias. a lot of the reaction that I got through emails and on Twitter was mocking of Glenn Kessler, mocking of the Washington Post, mocking of big media, dominant media in general. I don't want to mock them. I really don't. I want it to be fixed. That's what separates me from a lot of the people, particularly people on the right. The right makes a fortune off of liberal media. They make a fortune off of it by mocking it and using it as content. And they make a fortune off of it because the left has opened the door to market share going to the right that they're not even competing for. So I don't really want this to be about criticizing these places, except in service of making them better, having them do things differently. And I know from talking to media executives that some of the places, those of you who see liberal media bias would consider to be the worst offenders. I know from talking to people there that there is a movement afoot in almost every one of these places to try to figure this out, how to stay in business without losing their current audience in droves, but to find new people, and not just people on the right. Glenn Kessler wrote about how his boss said to him, how do we appeal to Fox News viewers? I want Fox News viewers to be looking and reading and watching and listening everywhere, not just places that appeal to them directly, but also people in the middle. There's so many people in this country, whether they've got a political affiliation or not, who are delighted to just get the facts. Part of why I think this program and Two-Way are doing pretty well as new enterprises is because we're providing all perspectives and we're providing facts under one roof. And that's not available. That's not on offer all that many places. And what I want is for big places to be fair. Why do we need big media places? Because big media places can do things that small places can't. The Next Up budget does not allow me, at least currently, to go cover the Putin-Trump summit, filing Freedom of Information Act requests. And then if the government denies that request, hiring a lawyer or having a lawyer who can file a lawsuit to try to get documents unsealed that are in the public interest, having bureaus around the world to cover international news, sending reporters out to try to investigate wrongdoing, alleged wrongdoing, and then coming up empty and saying there's no story here, even though we just put a reporter in Chattanooga, Tennessee for 2 months to interview people and to look through documents. Don't minimize those things. If you believe that a democracy must have, as the founders did, strong news organizations, right, to hold powerful interests accountable, you have to have some scale, right? There's some economies of scale involved in doing the things I just listed. And as valuable as podcasts are and blogging is and social media influencers, they don't have the same infrastructure, the same scale that these big places do. And I don't want big places that are biased with those powers, those capabilities. I want big places that are fair with those capabilities. And that's where we are right now. There aren't very many places, in fact, I'd argue there are really none, that are truly fair, that have those capabilities. And that's what we need. And it's hard to start new ones. I've been saying this for about 20 years, as the last 20 years or so, have really dug into this question of liberal media bias and simultaneous, the decline, because of the rise of digital, the decline of the legacy news organizations, the major networks, the Associated Press, the big newspapers, to say nothing of Newsweek and Time. They're nothing like as powerful as they were when my career began. And no one has started anything new that has reached that level of scale. Foreign bureaus, Freedom of Information Act requests, lawsuits, investigative reporting. Bloomberg is a place relatively new that I would say has aspired to some of those things, but that's funded by one of the richest people in the world. There's a real concern right now that the continued divide between the Trump White House and the Federal Reserve is putting us all behind the curve again. Will the Fed be able to take the right action at the right time, or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? So what does all this mean for your savings? There's an opportunity now. Consider diversifying with gold through Birch Gold Group. For decades, gold has been viewed as a safe haven in times of economic stagnation or global uncertainty, or when there is high inflation. Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you've got an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Or you can buy some gold to keep in your safe at home. First, you need to get educated, and that's where Birch Gold comes in. They will send you a free info kit about gold. Just text the word NEXT to the number 989898. Again, text NEXT to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Fed falls behind the curve again for America, at least you can stay ahead for yourself.